Okay, well, let's get started on this second session. This is crafting your story. We've heard from many collaborative groups and organizations that partner with them that getting a story that's effective out there is a challenge, but recognizing it's really important. Really grateful, Brett, that you were so willing to do this two-part series on crafting your story. Um, I enjoyed last week. I think I learned a lot. I was just saying that now every time I read something, I'm like, okay, what's the headline? What's the lead? Were the images right? How would I have done this differently? And I know for me that template that you gave us for how to even just start writing something was really great. Once upon a time, da 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 da.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was really useful too. So really appreciate you doing the first session last week, and then this opportunity for people to join today and ask questions or bring projects forward that they're working on to get ideas and feedback from you. Brett, I'm going to turn it over to you, and we can see what questions people have, what projects they're working on, that they would love to get feedback. And Daniel, welcome to you as well.
Well, I'm glad, Heather, that you're having that disease of editing everything you see, and it's really good training, right? Like to do that when you see a press release or even a story or another conservation video, just to kind of critique it. You don't need to be too aggressive in that, but it's good for you to kind of think about, what would have been a better headline, because we all know how important that is. So I think it's a good thing to have that. And, I don't mind that I've had it for, I'm not going to say how many years now. Yeah, so welcome back to the session, and we're going to dive into hopefully one of your projects. I think Sandy mentioned last week that she might have something that we could focus on. I don't know if Daniel or Jerry or Nicole, if you guys have one that you guys want to do as well. I think to kind of we can kind of see how long it might take us to do one, but probably two or three is kind of what we'll be able to see, within this, next 50 minutes. So who wants to go first? I guess Sandy does.
Yeah, I recently tried to do or wrote a blog, and sometimes you get started and you forget, and then you forget what it was the original intent was. And so what I was trying, the message I was trying to convey was that that forest restoration in northern Colorado is really the sum of its parts, right? That if we kind of if we do piecemeal implementation, that's not going to be effective. That we really need to have a landscape view, and we need to try our best to design projects and fund projects that enhance other work that's already going on. So, for example, we recently launched the Big Thompson Initiative, and it will complement 16,000 acres of work already planned by the U.S. Forest Service in the watershed. So, we can not only leverage funds, but leverage work, right, to have a bigger impact and reduce and mitigate more acres potential wildfire. So, but we also recently had the Cameron Peak fire of 209,000 acres. And there's a lot of questions out there from I guess the public saying, well, you almost 210,000 acres burned. Like, what else is there? Is there really still work that needs to be done? And the answer is yes, there's work that still needs to be done, and that it has to be collaborative, and it has to be cross-boundary, and it has to happen fast, because in a blink of an eye, 10 years will go by, and we'll have another fire, and it'll be another big one, just like High Park was in 2012. So I had those two things kind of going through my mind. And the last thing was, as I mentioned last week, Brett, was originally, before the Cameron Peak fire, our analyses laid out 37,000 acres in need of immediate treatment for a price tag of $90 million, of which we would leverage a lot of funding, but it would take care of 90% of the risk to water infrastructure in the Big Thompson watershed from the catastrophic effects of wildfire. After Cameron Peak and East Troublesome fires, our priority areas shrunk by 9,000 acres. And so now we're down to a price tag of 67 million to treat 28,000 acres. And so I want to try to find a way, since we put out a press release and we put out all these marketing materials, we did a big campaign. And then shortly after that, when I said we probably jumped the gun launching the campaign, but we did, and now it is what it is. So how do I kind of sneak this new information in there without people calling BS on the whole thing? So
right.
So that
I
was
guess if we follow the template that we kind of talked about last week, who are the collaborators on this? So who are the groups that are involved? You should identify and figure out what role each one of them plays in that, and then talk about the audience that you're trying to target. And I think you had a question last week about the press release, and do I send out a correction like, everything's changed? And I think the answer to that is you do send out another press release, but there's nothing for you to correct. Everything that you wanted to do, you'd still like to do, but the fire has changed everything. And like I think I mentioned last week, the media might be more interested in the fact that you had to change your plans because of the wildfire.
okay.
Because it's, something like, well, the best laid plans, right? Like we can't control Mother Nature, but maybe we had something to do with the fact that this happened in the sense of the climate change and such. But so you could use that as the hook, we had all this great stuff planned, and then this fire came along, and guess what? We still want to do what we wanted to do in the first place, but now we have to modify our plan, and because of the fire. And in fact, there's more of a threat now, because if you're talking about protection of the watershed, you've got the ash and the mud flows that are going to happen for 5 to 6 to 7 years pretty intensely, which isn't good for any watershed. It's not good for any of the wildlife, and then of course the other really big issue is non-native vegetation that moves in after fires that can present, even like you said, another catastrophic fire in a shorter period of time, because it's because it burns faster and it burns quicker, and meanwhile it may not provide any benefit to the native wildlife. So you kind of got slowed down by the process of the fire, but in some ways you need to, the work is more important than ever. So let's look at that. Is your audience your members, or the members of the other organizations, or is it the partners as a whole, and trying to reinforce to them that you're still engaged in this, and you're just taking a different approach? Or is it the general public? Is it the media? What's your number one target audience, do you think, in this case? To me, when we talk about the press release, that sounds like the media.
I think I was writing it for the general public, but really, if you think about it, our primary target is going to be potential contributors to this initiative. We need, high dollar donors. We're looking for strategic investors of $50,000 or greater to get us into the ballpark we need to get into to be able to effectively treat 28,000 acres. So I think ideally, since that at the end of the day, those are the people that we really need to speak to say, hey, this is still really important, and your participation and your contribution is as critical as ever. Yeah.
Right. So how you write that might be the main thing you consider in that target audience. But in that case, those potential partners might be appeased with something that you do for the media or for the general public overall too, right? Like, you could write a generic piece, and generic's a sad word in that case. You could write a piece that is, let's say, just kind of encompasses everything, and then when you present it to potential partners, you could say, hey, look, we need help with this. It's even more important now, and that's something you can say in the general release, obviously. But there's some, how you send it to the different target audiences might be the difference in, if you're trying to reach a general public, you're going to put it on your website, you're going to send it out in the newsletter, you're going to send it on social media. Whereas if you're targeting media, you're going to try to get it right in their email inbox, hopefully followed up with a phone call. I want to make sure you saw the email, and if you have any questions, here's my phone number in case you didn't see it. And if you're going to send it to possible other partners, funders, then you might think about a different way to craft the send message, but you could still include the original content that you produce.
Okay.
It just depends on that. I mean, I'm all for not writing 50 different things. And like I talked a lot about multi-purposing last week. It's just, our time is too precious to spend it trying to rewrite something 6 different ways. So I would try to come up with one really nice general description of what the project was, what happened with the fire. Make sure to include some images of the fire. People want to, that's going to get a reaction from them. They're going to say, oh my gosh, look at that, and that's the power of the pictures we talked about, right? And then, just see what kind of response you get from that. But definitely, I guess in this case, I'd be really tempted to say, write your own story. Don't make it a press release style. Like we were talking about, what I do sometimes when I want to send out a press release is I write our Trout Unlimited story the way we want it to be. We include quotes from our staff, from our partners, from ranchers, from whoever is involved. And then we use that as the press release. And we send that to the media. And we say, here's the story we did about our project. And then that way, if they, in the case of smaller media publications, both online and in print, weeklies, and smaller communities, which can be really, really important in helping spread the message in a tight community. If they pick up your story and run it because they need to have more content that week, then that's great for you because it's your voice and you know exactly what they're going to be producing. And if you include in that email to that media staffer, if you guys want to write your own story, feel free to reach out to us and we'll provide you with contact for all the people that you see in this story, and we can help you find others if you need them. And by the way, we can provide pictures, whatever you need for the media production, we can provide.
Okay.
And that, like I said, ties back into this idea of like just conserving your time and energy, because if you continue to try to address if you try to write a separate thing for different kinds of media, national, local, uber local, then you're again just it can be really frustrating, really time demanding, and you may not see the return that you want on that either. So
Yeah, another concern though too, Brett, and I mean, we still are moving forward because it's important. It's in the neighboring watershed to where the Cameron Peak fire happened. But there's also a sensitivity factor because right now, like in all last fall, when the fire was burning, people are focused on the Poudre watershed because that has sustained the biggest impact from this fire. So we have to be sensitive to the fact that people want money to go there, people want resources to go there and efforts to go there. So we have to be careful of our wording and make sure that we are sensitive to the impacts that
Sure,
that
and
watershed has sustained.
that's a great thing to observe and recognize because it does matter. People, media might be more inclined or funders might be more inclined to give to something that suffered more. But this is where you can be proactive. We're doing proactive work on the land that was not lost in the fire, and we can try to prevent what happened there from happening here. It's a horrible thing that happened there. We do not want to see it here on the land that we've committed to. I'm curious if anybody else has any other thoughts about Sandy's program and project and what she's talking about here. You guys have any thoughts? The think tank.
See everybody's wheels turning.
Yeah.
I could tell you what I did right if you want to know.
Well, I was going to say you could share it with us if you wanted in the chat, a link, if you have a link, or
to the story, to the blog.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
If
I'm
you're
not in love with it. That's why I was like, God, maybe I'll just pull this off the website and like redo it, because I'm like, oh, I don't love it.
You can do that. You can update it.
I know.
That's the beauty of the web, right? Like,
I can send you the link. You'll be the only ones who probably read it. So.
Well, it'll be easier for you to change it, right?
Yeah.
That's really, I mean, look, being in the conservation world is really hard. There's not a lot of victories.
Yeah.
It's a tough thing because we're all so excited about the work we're doing. And we talk about this at Trout Unlimited all the time. There's so few victories. You really have to celebrate them. Both internally as an organization, as individuals in each of those projects, and then also as an organization outward. Really celebrate that partnership and that collaboration that made it work. So yeah, it's important to remember that we need to celebrate.
I was wondering if in this instance, and maybe you did this, Sandy, if this is an opportunity to really kind of underscore the threat that exists if action doesn't happen, because here you've got the perfect example of what happened last summer. And so perhaps there's a way to be sensitive to that and that impact, but at the same time say, no, it's even more important for us to pay attention on other watersheds in the Front Range and to really invest now in these places and get these projects done. So maybe there's a way to take that angle. Yeah.
And one other thing I've learned is you got to say it, 10 different times, 10 different ways, because everyone's not always paying attention one week and the next week they're like, oh yeah, that's true. I hadn't thought about that. Or yeah, like Brett was mentioning last week, what catches their eye one time may not the next, or, don't assume that they read it. Yeah. So I feel like a broken record sometimes because I'm like, God, I feel like I keep saying the same thing over and over again. But then I go to, we have a board meeting and my board members are like, what would be really great is if we knew more about this. And I'm like, oh gosh, well, if you read any of the blogs, and I know it's not like I'm posting them, I don't post that many, a few a year probably.
It's so frustrating when you hear that stuff,
Yeah.
When the project, staff in the field are telling you, well, we really need to write this story. I'm like, you mean the one I did last week?
Yeah,
come on.
That I've done three times. Or
And then the other thing I have a big quirk about with our staff is be proud of what you do. Share it on your own social media. Share. That's how we spread the word, right? Like, pretend like everybody's your mom and then you want to show it off to your mom that you had a really cool project and put it on your own social media, and be proud of it. I can't, and I appreciate the fact that people want to keep a private and a work life separate. And I get that. But some of the stuff I see people posting is not like,
nobody cares.
Come on, yeah. So I just quickly looking at your post here. I like the subheads that's very effective. And one of the things that we do a lot of, or are starting to do more of, is because it helps Google searches. You show up more when you use subheads. So, but one thing I would do is I would make those subheads a different font, bold, larger, so that it really stands out, so it calls attention to it. The other thing I would consider, and this goes back to my newspaper days, is breaking the graphs up more, the paragraphs, so that like this first one, you know, it seems kind of long, it's kind of intimidating to look at.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Like you see it and it's like, okay, there's a lot of information there, and it might be intimidating to somebody who's like, oh, you know. But if you break it up at the end of that first graph and start the Colorado State Forest Service as another graph, and I say graph all the time, people get confused, paragraph, and then even again on the according, it breaks it up and it makes it look less intimidating. People are like, oh, it just has a better flow. It feels, you know. And the same thing, you know, with the other ones, you can break those up, and maybe in this case, not after the first graph, and probably not on a break like but the district, but certainly, you know, that one might be pretty good the way it is, because it's, except for quotes, you should try to always have quotes on their own, in their own paragraph. So like you start there with the, well, and the next one, I think it's a matter of putting the camera peak fire, and that's a good block right there, because it's a good quote. But yeah, if you break this up a little bit, I think it'll feel a little more appealing to people. The hyperlinks are good. Oh, wait, is that a hyper? Yeah, okay. And then one thing we try to do so people can feel like they're real people involved in this is put a tagline on the bottom that's like your name, who wrote it, and explains who you are, and you can put a hyperlink to your email there, because it just makes people feel like, oh, this is a real person, this wasn't generated by a bot, you know. It just gives it a little personality, and gives you some cred for what you've done and the work you've done.
Yeah, I'll have to run it by my my ED. She initially, and I've been with her for 3 years now, but initially said she wanted them to be anonymous, and so I was like, okay, because I did that. I had a tagline initially, but I could probably go back to her now that I've been working with her for 3 years. She might be like,
she might have her reasons for that, and they might make a lot of sense. But you know, at Trout Unlimited, we're all about our people being real people, and that our comm staff is part of our organization. They're not just, you know, pumping out this content that, you know, is anonymous and ghost written type of thing. I think that sometimes when you do that, there's a sense that somebody externally is producing it, you know, like an outside agency, and some people get turned off by that too. They want there to be people who are engaged and passionate about the work.
Okay. Yeah. I know I'm a slave to Yoast, and it's always like, oh, your readability, the Fleischmann score. I'm like, oh, damn you, Yoast. It's not that complicated. But, you know, it really struck home the other day when you said about your friend's mom going, I couldn't read that. You know, it made no sense to me. And so I'm always I do try to, you know, listen to what Yoast tells me, because it makes perfect sense to me, but it might not to everybody else. And it's always complaining about me using a passive voice. I'm always getting in trouble for using a passive voice. And I'm like, well, that kind of comes along with the, you know, writing an anonymous, you know, blog.
Yeah, I'm going to share something that I found today on, I can't remember how I came across it actually. I think it was in a New York Times email that I get. But there was a story that caught the headline caught my attention, believe it or not. They hooked me. And some of you may have seen this already, but I shared this with our science staff and our comms team already. But basically the headline is, are you confused by scientific jargon? So are scientists. It's right. It just plays right into the mom thing that we talked about last week. You know, if your mom doesn't get it, who is going to get it?
Right.
If your mom won't read it, then you know, it's in sorry shape. So yeah, there's a lot to think about in that case, but I think you did a good job of that. And if you don't need to necessarily address that you already did you know, that you already did a press release about this. Oh, I'm sorry, it's all changed. You don't need to do that. Just revisit it entirely and start with the main event, which is that fire.
Yeah.
You know, it wreaked havoc on the land, and it kind of changed our plans a little bit.
Yeah. It wreaked havoc on everybody. So.
Well,
Yeah.
they all do. There's nothing really,
Yeah.
you know, valuable about that kind of a fire.
Yeah.
You know, people can argue that it can be good, but those mega fires are just, the catastrophic fires are so different than a you know, a farmer burning the weed at the end of their season, like the Native Americans used to do on the plains to generate new growth. Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah.
Did that help,
Thanks.
Sandy?
Yeah. Yes. Thank you. Thank you.
You bet. Okay.
You know, I feel good that you didn't look at it and go, ugh, this is terrible. Take it down right away. But you can text
I'll look
if you
at
want.
it later.
Yeah, email me later. Email me later. Heather will give you my contact information. You can say, it's terrible. Take it down.
It's great.
Okay.
I just, you know, and a lot of kind of what I was saying is just kind of stuff that we've learned through our comms team and our posts. And, but like I said, the newspaper thing definitely,
yeah, I'll work on that.
Break that up so that it's because it's hard to imagine that it's intimidating, right? But think as a reader does, and somebody who has 10 seconds, you know, they click on it and they're like, okay, I'm not going to read that. That's too.
They're goldfish. Yeah.
Exactly. All right. Does anybody else have something they want to share or have specific questions? It doesn't need to be a project overlook like that. If anybody has any thoughts, go ahead, Jerry.
I actually have something. I had to miss session 1 last week, so I apologize. I hope I'm not asking something that you guys discussed last week. But I'm involved with a brand new organization, and one of the first things we want to do is put out a brochure. So do you have any specific suggestions about how to make an outstanding brochure that people want to take home?
I mean, we can talk about that for sure. And we didn't specifically talk about that, but you could follow a lot of the same kinds of things that we followed for the press release and the blog, you know, or even a video. Just, you know, identify your audience. So what, when you say you're saying a printed brochure, right? Which
printed brochure
is fading in kind of the realm of the, you know, it's not as powerful as it used to be. People just want to do digital and they want to, you know, send a newsletter with an attachment. But there is a really strong value in these, especially in these smaller communities. If you go to an event and you have a table and you have this nice brochure that explains who you are and what you're up to and how you can help, it can be really valuable. I'm producing, as an example, our team out of Jackson, Wyoming is producing a really slick publication. It's going to be about 7 pages, I think, of our project work on the Snake River. And we're going to be putting it in the one fly fishing contest swag bag that's going to be coming out this September, because the people who participate in that event are pretty big bucks. And they'll be interested to see the work that we're doing on the river they're fishing, and that they've come across the country to fish. And we're going to, you know, we're spending a lot of time and effort and spending some money in this. It's a good investment for us to get that in their hands. So some of the questions are, do you want to just do a front and a back side? Do you want to do a trifold? Do you have an idea of like how many pages you want it to be? or, I mean, these are the kind of questions that you got to figure out, like what will be the most valuable, what will be the biggest investment for us. And I guess it depends on how much you have to say. In our case, we're going to play up our pictures nice and large because they're telling. They tell a story in their own, 50 to 60 words on each project, and a recap from the director of our program, who's got a big smiling face and says, "Send us money," basically, right? You know, so you know, listing accomplishments, goals is really important. But once we get the video up, I think it would help you to take a look at it. And there's a thing that we did there that's called the story spine, and it's a kind of a template to help you identify where certain emphasis should be made, and helps you kind of figure out the who, what, where, when, and how.
Okay, so yeah.
Of what it, just really spending some time. The more time you spend on it before it goes to the printer, the better you'll feel about it. I think they're not obsolete. They can be very, very valuable. But in some cases, when I talk to our field staff, I'm like, okay, do we really need to do this, or can this be done digitally? You know, but in some cases, they're like, nope, I need something I can knock on somebody's door, on their ranch door, and hand them this, and they can set it on their table and look at it later, as opposed to try to send them an email they'll never open. So there definitely is a value. Of course, the more of those you buy, the cheaper it is. The problem with that also is that if you if you spend a lot of money and you get a lot of them, and then things change rapidly, then you've got a lot of them that you're going to be throwing in the dumpster. So you have to really be methodical about how many you think you need, and reprint. I'd be more inclined to try to reprint after a couple hundred. Then it just depends on, you know, what your plans are. If you're going to have a mass mailing or something, then that makes more sense to produce more of them. Or if you're a show bound, you know, person, that doesn't really happen right now, then, you know, that's something to consider as well.
Okay, thanks. We're just, we want to kind of introduce ourselves because we're just brand new. And so we're looking at ways to get ourselves out there and have the community know who our organization is and what kind of projects we're going to be doing, and
are you
what it all
statewide?
involves.
Are you around the Mesquite area?
We're around the Mesquite area, so it's called the Virgin River Watershed. We're Southern Nevada. The river does go through Utah and Arizona,
right,
coming into Nevada, but we're really just getting started, and we've had the collaborative going where we have, you know, recreation is brought into it, and you know, the studies with the fish and wildlife, and then there's a lot of riparian restoration that we're going to be doing. We have a problem with tamarisks here, and so we've been doing a lot of tamarisk removal and then revegetating with native plants, things like that. There'll be lots of opportunities for people to volunteer. We're going to be needing volunteers when we start doing a lot of the planting. Right. And so for the most part, we're just trying to find a way to get ourselves out there so people start recognizing, oh, the VRC, the Virgin River Coalition, oh, this is what you guys do, and we want to get involved and help. So it's just, we're trying to just get ourselves out there at this point.
Yeah, and I think the brochure is a good way. Then you can set it at community events, and you know, but yeah, there's a lot of other components you're going to have to engage in to get the level of attention that I think you're going after.
That we want.
It's going to be a complex process, but the good thing is the material that you gather for the brochure you can use in all the other forms of your efforts, right? So this is something I say a lot. It's multi-purpose, this stuff. You've got it, you've written it, you spent a lot of time and effort getting it there. Find another voice for it. Don't assume that somebody who sees it on the brochure is not going to see it in an email or social media or in a newspaper story, right? Or a TV thing. Just get it. You've produced it, now utilize it and get the most out of it.
Does anybody have any kind of favorite introductory brochures they could share with Jerry as examples?
I'm trying to think of some. If I'll spend a little bit of time maybe tomorrow looking at some, and I'll respond to the email you send out again, Heather.
There's one, I believe it's called the Upper Arkansas Voluntary Flow Management Program. And they have a really nice, concise brochure, and I'm trying to see if I can find a digital copy of it. But I really like that one. What's that?
It's in that email you threw away.
Yes, right. Well, I actually have a physical copy of it, so if nothing else, I can send you a photo of it.
That's great.
But
That'd be great, Daniel, if you could track that down. If anybody else has a favorite brochure, send it my way. And see, we've got about 15 minutes left here. If there's another project or questions people have, I don't know. Johnny, did you raise your hand earlier, or Daniel, do you have something? Nicole?
I have, I think you're on mute there. I guess I had one quick question. We're working on a project called the Conejos River Partnership Project that we're sort of leading and helping to facilitate. There's a whole lot of partners involved. The Conejos River is in southern Colorado, so we've got Colorado Parks and Wildlife involved to help with fisheries and consult on fish passage. And, we have a couple folks who are kind of helping us out with some of the riparian vegetation improvements that we're doing. And then we're working with ditch companies as well, because a big part of the project is replacing old diversion structures, with ones that are fish passable and ones that are more resilient to, high flow events. Exactly.
Right.
So it's this really big multi-benefit project that we're really excited about. We've definitely been trying to spread the word and kind of keep people up to date with the project. We do Facebook posts every once in a while, and our regular newsletters that come from our nonprofit, kind of talk about the project. But something that we're trying to figure out is how can we broaden our audience? Because I think we have this core group of people who always read our content, and that's wonderful, but we're trying to figure out how to maybe include a broader group of local, the public, I would say, in the San Luis Valley, but also sort of, maybe statewide in Colorado, more of our partners, and making sure that some of the funding agencies who are helping to fund the project are seeing our content. I guess I was just curious, Brett, if you had any suggestions for other means of getting that kind of information out there.
Yeah, that's a really tough one. I think last week I called it preaching to the choir, right? Like you're just giving information that people who are familiar with the project or your work are already familiar with, and it's just like, oh, good, they're still doing what they said they were doing, and that's important, obviously. And I hate the whole outside the box type of thing, but reaching out to different audiences is can be difficult, but it can also be easier than you think. In some cases, like I would presume that some of the work you're doing is on private land. The ranchers, landowners, that's a group that Trout Unlimited works really hard to try to engage with, and if you can get them to talk about the work that's being done, that's really, really valuable for a lot of reasons. One is that it gives you guys cred in that area. It also creates more possibilities for work for you. Somebody who you maybe have had a hard time reaching out to, if they hear from a neighbor who had a great experience with you, they're going to say, hey, I had a great experience. These guys are awesome. I've been wanting to do this work forever, and they came in and did it. And
Right.
That's worth more than, a Facebook post. Now, if they share a
Right.
Facebook post that says that, then that's valuable because that's going to a new audience. That's going to somebody who hasn't seen what you're doing. So one of the ways to really, on social media, really engage with that is to tag all the partners in your post, and do it in a fun way where you say thanks to, and then have, all your posts, pictures of the partners. Uh, if you're doing a brochure, put their logos on it. Be a good partner, and hopefully they'll return the favor. But that tagging thing is a way, one, for them to see that you've done it, because they're like, oh, I wonder what that was, and then they look at it, and then they're like, oh, that's great. Now we should share it. And then that opens up a lot more potential for people that you may not be connected with that see what you're all about. So social media is a big one. Of course, outside of that, it's really traditional media. It's still
Yeah.
really, really valuable, and especially in smaller communities. And the biggest obstacle is finding a reporter who has time and can come and do it. And that's where, if you write your own story and you send it to them, and they're like, hey, look, we've got this entirely written piece already, we just need to publish it. and
Right.
and it happens. There's a good example of that we really appreciate in Wyoming, in Sweetwater County, and there's a thing called Sweetwater News, and they just basically, we send a press release and boom, the next day it's on their site. It doesn't get any easier than that, and that's bigger than any of the newspapers there, and it's showing our voice as we wanted it to be. You're controlling the message in that sense as well. So, making a relationship with the local media, whether it's online or traditional newspaper once a week, or radio show, can be really valuable. Podcasts are a little, I think those have a little bit larger of a kind of a national feel than super, local. But, I guess the answer is try everything. But
Yeah.
if you can get people that you're benefiting who can tell other people who might benefit, that's a really big thing, because it's not just spreading the information about what you're doing, but it's spreading the potential for you to do more of it.
Right.
So
No, that's really helpful, actually. I kind of just had a couple of ideas of a couple local groups who might help us reach, the ag community, which is a really hard group to reach.
absolutely.
So
And that is important. And, some of the best pieces that I feel like, one thing I try to do, and this is something you might think about, Sandy, too, is this idea that, I think I said this last week, that the communications team shouldn't be the only voices that the public sees or hears from. I want that project leader who's sitting in the backhoe, pulling out an old diversion and putting a new one in, in his Carhartt in December, to be a voice. And I want a picture of that guy doing that, or that woman doing that, right? Or that, them working with the school program to put a telemetry device in a 20-inch cutthroat so they can track it. And so kids are there watching, I mean, we need their voices, and I can help amplify and clean up that voice. But including staffers and um, volunteers and partners in your pieces that you produce on your own website and your own stories can be really valuable. I know when I reach out to the Forest Service, and some of them are like, no way, I'm not gonna try to write anything. And I just tell them, like, I'm here, like, so I can interview you and I can write the story, or you can try to write something and I'll help you edit it and we'll get it where you're happy with it. I'm here to help you get it out however you want it, but just, let me help you do it. And that really is, then hopefully they'll share that on their own social media because they're proud that their name's on it. And then it gets out to other new people. And partners are really huge in helping spread the word, especially if they're non-traditional partners at the Farm Bureau. and that's a really important one for a lot of our work. I think almost every conservation group has to have some kind of a connection with agriculture and ranching, and having a good relationship with them is really important and really valuable. Yeah, go ahead, Johnny.
Only wanted to offer something. I sent to you, Heather, today an article. I just sent it an hour ago or something. It's a magazine article. There's a statewide magazine in Oregon called 1859, which was the year that Oregon became a state, I think. And it was a local area journalist named Felisa, who's been very close all these years to the work that we do and to people. But this is a different example rather than a 2-page, 8-page. This is a 6-page article about the history of our development of collaboration and partnership, working with the Forest Service and the communities, and internationally as well. And so I would like to share that article. It is called Common Ground, but if you got the front page of it, there's a catchy kind of headline on it. But in any case, oftentimes we're into little tiny blog, 2-column this, and this, and this. But every once in a while, an in-depth article, like you said, Brett, if you can get to be in with traditional media, regular media, here it is. This is how rural ranchers have worked with conservationists for the good of Oregon and beyond. And it's only 6 pages, but it really, I try not to say it's about me, but part of it is. And so there's some really important things in here about the evolution of collaboration in a community, working with multiple partners and agencies and things like that took place since 2004, 5. I mean, it's not fast. It's not fast, but
Right.
there is success at every step of the way, and there's lessons to be learned and ideas and things like that. So I just thought maybe this would be an opportunity to share something across this process.
Right. I think that you're
have something to do with.
right. I think you're really, your point about a big in-depth piece is super valuable, is absolutely right. And, we in this day and age, we're all like, instant gratification from a, tweet or an Instagram story, or, that disappears after a second. And having something substantial like this, people really are hungry for this. And this kind of plays into what we were talking about with the videos last week. Like, don't be afraid to do a 10-minute video, but do a 10-minute video, a 5-minute video, a 2-minute video, and a 30-second video, right? The whole multi-purpose thing again, in the sense of, if you're going to have a film crew, have them do all of those things while they're there, instead of just like, okay, we're just going to do a 3-minute thing today, so we only need 4 minutes of footage, because 30-minute or 10-minute video is going to be like 3 hours of footage. But that's a great point, Johnny, and
last time,
strive for that.
We were talking about story, and yet most of what goes on by organizations trying to reach out is very brief, very quick, very 2-page. And Jerry Lynn, I was gonna say one suggestion about yours. How big is your area that you're trying to reach? A town, community,
Gary.
county? It doesn't matter. It's about a hook. And if you're new and you're doing something as an introductory, there is a way to perhaps get attention. And that's, a headline, what's missing? And then right down below it is, you are, we are. And then you describe what your vision is and what they can do to join with you and things like that. But it doesn't say anything. What's missing? Oh my God, I don't know what is. But that kind of a thing I've seen helpful for what you're,
that's good.
The stage that you're at.
Thank you.
Okay, Nicole, you gotta have something you want to ask, or you wouldn't be here.
I guess I'm one of the things that's bopping around in my head is we're coming up to Earth Day and I'm helping with an event is do you have any tips for maybe some more tips for when we're trying to build a connection with a news outlet or a reporter? Are there certain things that we can say to catch their attention in an email? I'm trying to find people who might know them to kind of give that personal introduction to make a connection that way. But do you have any other suggestions on how to build relationships with?
There's nothing more valuable than an in-person, media tour type of thing where, they come to the event and they see what you guys are all about. They see that you're people and that are concerned about things and it is really hard to get those, especially during COVID. But the reporters have so little time. They just really, coming from the newsroom almost 6 years ago now, it's really time is precious and they just don't have that time. A lot of the time that the reporters were going out to do something was on their own time because they were interested in it. And we need to acknowledge that time issue that they have, just like everybody else, right? But there's no way to beat that hands-on experience. I mean, we know that that's important with getting kids engaged, and getting a reporter out to do something is something that is memorable and gives them an easier opportunity to provide color from what they're experiencing. And that leads to better stories, right? Like if you do a phone interview, it's a phone interview in a story. If you take them out and give them the experience, which is really hard to do, then you're going to get a lot better product because they experienced it themselves and they can tell the story themselves. They can show us the story, not tell us the story like I mentioned last week. So I don't think there's anything more valuable than getting media out to experience one of your events, do a project. But it's really, really hard. And I would just say, don't hesitate to continue to make the request of somebody, or the invitation, I should say, to come and experience something. And ask them, look, maybe you can't come to this event that we're doing this day, but let me know if you ever want, if you have time, we could take a lunch and go tour something. I really want to get you out to see what we're doing, and it's a good excuse to get out of the office. And, so don't give up. And don't be afraid to continue to reach out. I mean, don't be a pest, of course, but just let them know that you really want to get them out because you think it's important.
Thanks.
Well, thanks, Brett. Thank you, everyone, for joining the second session here today. Hopefully, this was a good follow-on from last week, and hopefully, you got some good ideas and answers from Brett and each other. So thank you all for all the great work that you do for people and for the places that sustain them. We really appreciate that. And Brett, again, thank you so much for your time and helping us craft better stories.